Hi, everyone. My name is Aurelia Friedman. I'm Congressman Lieu's Special Projects Manager and Senior Field Representative in the district office. I'm excited to kick off this event today. I'm going to start with a quick bio of the congressman, introduce him, and then we'll get started and have the students show you what they've been doing over the past year. And then we'll go into a Q&A, and then I'll give some overview about how to apply for next year. So Congressman Lieu represents California's 36th congressional district in the United States House of Representatives. Congressman Lieu is serving in his 5th term in Congress and sits on the House Judiciary Committee and Foreign Affairs Committee. He was elected by his colleagues to serve as the vice chair of the Democratic Caucus, making him the highest ranking Asian American to have ever served in House leadership. He is the co-chair of the House's bipartisan task force on artificial intelligence. Congressman Lieu is a veteran, having served in active duty and then in the reserves for the Air Force. He retired in 2021 with the rank of colonel. Prior to being elected to Congress in 2014, Congressman Lieu served as a California state senator from 2011 to 2014, and before that as a state assembly member from 2005 to 2010. He started his elected service as the member of this Torrance City Council in 2002, and then prior to being on the council, he was a Torrance Environmental Quality Commissioner. Congressman Lieu's wife, Betty, is a member of the Torrance Board of Education, a member of the California's Commission on Special Education, and a former California Deputy Attorney General. They live in Torrance and have 2 sons, Brennan and Austin. And now it's my pleasure to introduce my boss, Congressman Ted Lieu.
Thank you so much, Aurelia. And I want to thank everyone for watching this youth town hall, and to the Youth Advisory Council for all the great work that you have done. I want to tell you a little bit about what's happening in DC as well as locally, and then look forward to the presentation from the Youth Advisory Council. Last term, we had one of the most significant Congresses in U.S. history. We passed a number of laws to move the American family forward. We passed the American Rescue Plan to help get us out of the pandemic. It was to get vaccines into people's arms, to reopen schools and keep them open, and to create jobs. We then followed that up with the bipartisan infrastructure law. Under the Biden administration, we have had historic job creation. Over 15 million jobs were created in the first half of the administration, the most in U.S. history. Last term, we also passed the CHIPS and Science Act to bring back high-tech chip manufacturing to the United States. That's good for our national security and good for our economy. We also passed the PAC to give veterans the compensation that they deserve for their service-related injuries. And we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. Half of that act went to reduce the deficit. The other half funded the greatest number of clean energy and climate change projects in U.S. history. So we are now in the implementation phase of a number of those laws. And so you see infrastructure projects happening, clean energy projects, as well as CHIPS plants being built across America. This term, Republicans took control, and I'm not being partisan, I'm just going to be objective. Basically, we went to the brink of a catastrophic default on our nation's debts. We went to the brink of a number of government shutdowns, and we delayed significantly funding to help our allies as well as humanitarian assistance. Each time we were able to resolve that because Democrats supplied the majority of votes to keep our country from going into crisis. We provided the majority of votes to prevent a catastrophic default on our nation's debts. If you look at that vote total, Democrats with the majority of the votes. We then did that again on 3 attempted Republican government shutdowns. Democrats provided the majority of votes to stop those shutdowns and to keep the government open. And then most recently, Democrats provided the majority of votes to get much needed humanitarian assistance to folks across the world, including to people in Gaza. We also provided funding to our allies. And again, both procedurally and substantively, their majority of votes came from House Democrats. So if you look at this term, in essence, House Democrats were the adults in the room and able to keep our country on track. And what I want to sort of talk a little bit now before we hear from the Youth Advisory Council is a little bit about what it's like to be a member of Congress. We're in 2-year legislative sessions. every 2 years, I vote over 1,000 times in committee as well as on the floor. And I'd say in 80 to 90% of those votes, I don't get a single phone call, email, or meeting. So when folks contact my office, when you send emails, when you try to meet with my staff or with me and have these meetings, it's really important because it causes my staff and I to focus on those issues and go, why are folks asking about this issue? And it causes us to look into it more and to do research on it more. The Youth Advisory Council is also very helpful because you also highlight important issues. And these are issues that are critical not only for our country, but also for our district. And let me just conclude now about our district. We have had really good job growth in the district. We have had a good balance of both protecting the environment as well as allowing our economy to do well. And if you sort of look at the future is bright. We have a number of companies that are continuing to locate in our district. And we have amazing technology and aerospace, as well as healthcare. And we have some light manufacturing. We have tourism. We really have a lot going on in this district. So I look forward to hearing from the Youth Advisory Council, and I'll kick it off now to Samantha, the president.
Um, Sorry, I'm unable to start my video, but I could just talk about what the Youth Advisory Council has done this past year. And I would first like to briefly go over what the Youth Advisory Council is and the topics that we covered over the year. So the Youth Advisory Council is made up of a diverse group of high school students from all around the 36th district, which is Congressman Liu's district. And we discuss bills at our meetings and vote on whether or not to recommend these bills for co-sponsorship to the congressman. I think I can say on behalf of the council that this was an amazing experience to be a part of, and I certainly learned a lot about the legislative process and really enjoyed being able to discuss political topics with my peers. I also would like to briefly cover the policy areas that we discussed in our meetings, in which the list of bills we discussed, as well as which ones were recommended for co-sponsorship, will be detailed later in the presentation. So the key topic areas we covered included climate change, money and politics, education, gun violence prevention, housing and homelessness, veteran issues, social justice issues, which included reproductive rights, civil rights, LGBTQ+ issues, labor and criminal justice reform, as well as foreign policy, healthcare, mental health, disability rights, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and technology. Additionally, the council drafted 3 bill proposals this year and which will be presented later today in our presentation. And I'm really proud of what we accomplished this year, and I would like to pass it on to Dahi to talk about what we discussed at our September meeting.
Hello, my name is Dahi Lieu. I'm currently a sophomore at South High School, and this is my first year serving on the Youth Advisory Council. The Youth Advisory Council convened on September 27th to delve into the pressing issues of climate change and campaign finance reform. Following a briefing on Congressman Liu's climate-focused legislation, the council discussed 4 proposed bills encompassing school rooftop gardens, clean energy microgrids, and corporate expenditure transparency. This session shed light on local and national endeavors addressing environmental and political challenges. Congressman Liu is a vocal advocate of climate change action and campaign finance reform through legislative efforts. His involvement spans bills like the Environmental Justice for All Act, tackling pollution inequities, and the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, proposing a carbon fee and dividend system to incentivize emissions reduction while supporting households. Bill HR 2786 was recommended by the council with a vote of 96% saying yes and 4% saying no for the congressman to co-sponsor. This bill prioritizes planting trees in areas lacking them, establishes grants for school rooftop gardens, and requires these gardens to be integrated into science curriculum while prohibiting invasive species. The congressman has selected to co-sponsor HR 891, the Energy Resilient Communities Act. It would require the Department of Energy to establish a program that grants that awards grants to make critical infrastructure more resilient to climate change hazards, such as grants for developing clean energy microgrids that support critical community infrastructure or customers of electric utilities with special energy needs due to medical conditions. The council also recommended the congressman to co-sponsor HR 891 with 96% voting yes and 4% voting no. The council strongly supports HR 4863 with 96% saying yes and 4% saying no, which compels companies to report political spending. This promotes transparency and aligns with the fiduciary duty of executives to prioritize shareholder interests. The council finds the bill's mandated quarterly reports particularly valuable for ensuring ongoing transparency. The council largely supports, with 83% saying yes and 17% saying no, HR 6168, a bill tackling climate change through ambitious goals. It bans emissions from new power plants, restricts fracking, and limits oil and gas exports, aligning with Congressman Liu's climate agenda. While acknowledging its ambitious nature, the council sees it as a necessary step and draws a positive comparison to California's successful Global Warming Solutions Act, highlighting the bill's potential for significant environmental impact and future-oriented benefits. Thank you, and this concludes my recap of the September YAC meeting. I will now pass it along to our recap of the October YAC meeting.
Hi, my name is Lieu, and I am a senior at El Segundo High School. At the October meeting, the Youth Advisory Council discussed education and gun violence prevention. The Youth Advisory Council discussed how gun violence prevention involves implementing laws to regulate firearms, promote public awareness and education on safe gun practices, and address mental health issues, as well as how education efforts frequently emphasize the importance of mental health support and early intervention to prevent acts of violence. Collaborative partnerships between schools, communities, and law enforcement are crucial for implementing effective prevention strategies. Ultimately, the goal is to empower individuals with the knowledge and skills necessary to mitigate the risks associated with gun violence and create safer environments for all. The Congressman has been a vocal advocate on addressing gun violence prevention. He has voted in support of the Protecting Our Kids Act, which is a comprehensive package of gun violence prevention proposals to stop the spread of gun-related crimes and help prevent future mass casualty shootings. Of the 6 bills the Youth Advisory Council recommended, the Congressman agreed to co-sponsor 3 of the bills, and the other 3 are still under review for co-sponsorship. HR 5449, the Stopping the Fraudulent Sales of Firearms Act, that amends Title 18 United States Code to make fraudulent dealings in firearms and ammunition unlawful and for other purposes. HR 4992, the Ghost Guns and Untraceable Firearms Act of 2023, which aims to amend Chapter 44 of Title 18 United States Code to ensure that all firearms are traceable and for other purposes. HR 4202, the Multiple Firearms Sales Reporting Modernization Act of 2023, which would amend Title 18 of the United States Code to expand to all firearms the requirement that all federal firearms licenses report sales of 2 or more handguns to the same unlicensed person within 5 consecutive business days. HR 5484, the Green Ribbon Act of 2023, which will strengthen and expand the Green Ribbon Schools program at the Department of Education by boosting the capacity of participating states to expand the number of engaged schools, applicants, and nominees, and for other purposes. HR 5474, the Jumpstart in College Act, that directs the Secretary of Education to make grants to support early college high school schools, dual or concurrent enrollment programs, and for other purposes. HR 5141, the Funding Early Childhood is the Right Idea Act, is intended to authorize funding for Section 619 and Part C of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This would assist states with early intervention services for children with disabilities 3 and 5 and 0 to 3 by bringing funding for these programs back to where it belongs. Thank you, and this concludes my recap of the October Youth Advisory Council meeting. I will now pass it on to Christine.
Hello, my name is Christine Sia, and I'm a senior at Palos Verdes High School. I'll briefly cover the housing and homelessness/veterans issues with which the Youth Advisory Council discussed at the November 2023 meeting. Some topics covered were veteran franchise owners, housing conditions, and veteran experiences. We discussed how to decrease barriers for the homeless and veterans to maintain housing, receive career and educational options, and increase general well-being. The Congressman has strongly advocated for addressing housing and homelessness/veterans issues. Namely, he introduced the Veterans Care Agreement and West Los Angeles Leasing Act, Fighting Homelessness Through Services and Housing Act, Prevent Evictions Act, Prevent Homelessness Act, and Housing for All Act. All of these address homelessness in a compassionate and holistic way by funding housing models, expanding supportive services/programs, and more investments. Furthermore, the Congressman has also strongly advocated for giving millions of dollars in federal grants for homeless/veteran affairs, such as in Santa Monica. Of the 7 bills the Youth Advisory Council recommended, the Congressman agreed to co-sponsor 1 bill. The bill that was co-sponsored is HR 5176, Affordable and Homeless Housing Incentives Act of 2023, which allows non-recognition of gain for income tax purposes from the sale of real property to a qualified housing operator for use or development by such operator as affordable housing. A bill that was selected for co-sponsorship was HR 645, Healthy Foundations for Homeless Veterans Act, which permanently authorized the Department of Veteran Affairs, or VA, to use specified funding to provide assistance to homeless veterans and veterans participating in the Department of Housing and Urban Development VA Supportive Housing Program. Other bills that were recommended and are under review for co-sponsorship are HR 1281, Housing Accountability Act of 2023, which provides statutory authority for the requirement that a property owner receiving low-income housing assistance payments for an existing public housing unit must maintain decent, safe, and sanitary conditions for the housing structure. HR 2846, Fair Housing Improvement Act of 2023, which amends the Fair Housing Act to prohibit discrimination based on sources of income, veteran status, or military status. HR 3214, Veteran Entrepreneurs Act of 2023, which allows a business-related tax credit of 25% of up to $400,000 of the franchise fees paid or incurred by an eligible veteran for the purchase of a franchise. The bill reduces the amount of such credit if the veteran does not own 100% of the stake or capital or profits interest of the franchisee. And finally, HR 602, to amend the VA Admission Act of 2018 to expand the Veterans Healing Veterans Medical Access and Scholarship Program to include more students in schools. This bill expands the Department of Veteran Affairs Medical Education Pilot Program, which currently provides funding for the medical education of 2 eligible veterans at each of the 9 covered medical schools. The bill adds 5 schools to the list of covered medical schools, increasing the number of veterans covered from 18 to 28. Thank you, and this concludes my recap of the November Youth Advisory Council meeting. I will now pass it on to Iona.
Hi, my name is Iona. I'm a senior at Harvard Westlake. At the January meeting, the Youth Advisory Council discussed social justice issues and how reproductive rights, civil rights, and LGBTQ+ issues, labor and criminal justice reform will be addressed in Congress. The Congressman has been a vocal advocate on addressing social justice issues, and of the 10 bills the Youth Advisory Council recommended, the Congressman agreed to co-sponsor 10 bills. The first one is HR 2904. Anti-Racism in Public Health, the Anti-Racism in Public Health Act of 2023. This bill establishes within the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention a National Center on Anti-Racism in Health and a Law Enforcement Violence Protection Program. The new center must carry out various activities to address racism and its impact on health and well-being, including declaring racism a public health crisis, collecting and analyzing data, and administering research and grant programs. Next was HR 4282, Equality for Families with Disabilities Act. This protects individuals with disabilities who are parents, legal guardians, relatives, other caregivers, foster or adoptive parents, or individuals seeking to become foster or adoptive parents from discrimination in the child welfare system by requiring state agencies to include explanations of the procedural safeguards and supportive parenting services it offers to them. HR 999, Civil Rights Legacy Protection Act. This bill aims to establish penalties for the international defacement, damage, or destruction of civil rights memorials and related structures on public property. The proposed law aims to protect historical monuments and memorials that commemorate events and figures associated with the civil rights movement. HR 1167, Justice for Black Farmers Act of 2023. This bill directs the Department of Agriculture to provide a variety of assistance to address historical discrimination and disparities in the agricultural sector. This assistance includes establishing an equity commission, a farm conservation corps, funding for historically Black colleges and universities to commence and expand courses of study focused on careers in agriculture or related disciplines and other forms of assistance. Next is HR 2954, Women in Criminal Justice Reform Act. This bill works to strengthen rehabilitation efforts, provide trauma-informed care and gender-responsive action, eliminate discriminatory sentences practices, and improve other supportive services to address the ways that women are disproportionately impacted by the criminal justice system. HR 2718, the Elder Justice Reauthorization and Modernization Act of 2023. This bill reauthorizes funding for programs to prevent, investigate, and prosecute elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and for other purposes. This act proposes significant amendments to the Social Security Act. Section 2 focuses on reauthorizing funding for programs addressing elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Additionally, grants for nursing home worker training are allowed under the bill. HR 697, Justice for All Act of 2023. This bill prohibits discrimination based on sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or race-related characteristics in schools, businesses, federally funded programs, and other settings. It also provides statutory authority for and expands types of civil actions that may be brought for violations. HR 3805, Kids Health Act of 2023. This bill requires Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to implement a demonstration program that supports a whole child's health model for children under Medicaid and the Child's Health Insurance Program. HR 6456, Confronting the Police Violence Against Children Act of 2023. This seeks to address incidents where children are seriously harmed or killed by law enforcement officers. It mandates the National Institute of Justice to conduct a thorough study of such instances over the past 15 years while consulting with various stakeholders and presenting recommendations for prevention. Lastly, Bill HR 6202, Counseling Not Criminalization in Schools Act, which aims to promote the well-being of students by reallocating funding from school policing to mental health and support services, prioritizing a therapeutic approach over punitive measures to address behavioral issues in education settings. Thank you, and this concludes my recap for the January Youth Advisory Council meeting. I'll now pass it on to Lucy.
Hi, my name is Lucy Chang Kaplan. I'm currently a junior at New Charter High School. During our February meeting, we discussed foreign policy. Congressman Lieu is on the Foreign Affairs Committee, making him a very active member in foreign policy legislation. In total, the Council recommended 6 bills, all of which are currently under review for co-sponsorship. HR 4567, strengthening the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. This bill expands sanctions on goods produced or associated with forced labor in the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region of China. It broadens the scope of the sanctions by expanding the type of government-affiliated labor programs that trigger the presumption to any entity that works with any state-sponsored labor program targeting persecuted groups. 94% of the council voted yes, while 6% voted no. HR 3934, Uyghur Human Rights Protection Act. This bill designates certain residents of the Xinjiang region in China as prioritized refugees of special humanitarian concern and addresses other related issues. This priority designation shall apply to individuals who reside in or fled Xinjiang and who suffered persecution on account of their peaceful political, religious, or cultural activities or associations, or have a well-founded fear of such persecution, or have been formally charged, detained, or convicted for certain peaceful actions related to Xinjiang. 94% of the council voted yes, while 6% voted no. HR 6798, Internet at Hardship Post Act, this bill provided internet at residences owned or leased by the United States government in foreign countries for the use of Department of State personnel or for other purposes. 89% of the council voted yes, while 11% voted no. HR 6455, Climate Displaced Persons Act. This bill proposes significant amendments to the Immigration and Nationality Act and the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 to address climate-induced displacement. 94% of the council voted yes, while 6% voted no. HR 5907, Stop Transnational Regression Act. This bill aims to address the growing issue of transnational repression by criminalizing such acts and introducing penalties for offenders. It defines transnational repression as activities by foreign governments, their agents, or proxies intended to intimidate, coerce, or harm individuals, including extrajudicial killings, harassment, and digital threats. This bill imposes fines and imprisonment with enhanced penalties for severe offenses overseen by the Department of Justice. 94% of the council voted yes, while 6% voted no. And next, HR 5557, Combating Foreign Surveillance Spyware Sanctions Act. This bill establishes a comprehensive framework to address counterintelligence threats posed by foreign commercial spyware. The act empowers the president to impose sanctions on entities and individuals involved in the development, sale, or use of spyware that poses risks to U.S. national security. This concludes my recap of the February meeting, and I will now pass it on to Gemma.
Hi, my name is Gemma Burstein, and I'm a senior at Miracosta High School. During our March meeting, the council discussed topics including healthcare, mental health, and disability rights. Our conversation focused on the necessity of mental health support tailored to high school students, and we discussed the different resources available at our own high schools, such as counseling, one-on-one support, and curriculum, which provided important background on what was working well and what was lacking in the education of mental health. Janet Turner, Deputy District Director for Outreach for Congressman Lieu, also spoke to us regarding current issues in healthcare, such as the significant shortage of doctors, social workers, and nurses, and the pressing effects of these concerns have on the field of healthcare in our country. Congressman Lieu is an advocate for both physical and mental health and has recently introduced the Health AI Act, which aims to provide grants for research on how artificial intelligence will improve patient care, as well as securing $1 million for funding of the Beach Cities Health District's construction of the Alcove Youth Wellness Center, which focuses on the prevention and early intervention of mental health concerns. Of the 6 bills that we recommended, the congressman selected 5 to co-sponsor. And these include HR 3086, Equal Healthcare for All Act, which prohibits the discrimination in healthcare based on race, religion, or other characteristics, and adds measures that assist the HHS to resolve complaints about inequitable healthcare and establishes grants to promote equality in healthcare. HR 7108, Expanding Access to Mental Health Services in Schools Act of 2024. This bill establishes grants for school-based mental health services, specifically focusing support towards high-need agencies. The funding would be used towards recruitment, hiring, and diversification of services provided at all levels of schooling. HR 3583, Real Education and Access for Healthy Youth Act of 2023, which establishes sex education and health services for younger individuals. And the funding would also be allocated to youth serving organizations that direct services to marginalized youth. HR 3548, Pursuing Equity in Mental Health Act. This requires the HHS to implement strategy for the promotion of mental health services, reducing the stigma around conditions and substance use disorders in minority groups, along with modifying programs to address racial disparities. And then lastly, HR 4541, Rise from Trauma Act. This establishes and extends programs to support families who have experienced trauma. and it requires the HHS to educate frontline workers about trauma, toxic stress, and resilience, as well as requiring the establishment of a national center. Thank you so much. That's the end of my summary, and I will now pass it on to Samantha.
Hi, my name is Samantha Chang, and I'm currently a senior at the California Academy of Math and Science. At the April meeting, the Youth Advisory Council discussed policy relating to cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and technology. The Youth Advisory Council discussed topics such as the cybersecurity workforce, equity in STEM, and artificial intelligence fraud. The congressman has been a vocal advocate on addressing artificial intelligence, as he is the co-chair of the bipartisan task force on artificial intelligence in the House of Representatives. In the past, he introduced H.R. 2894, a bill that prevents any artificial intelligence system from launching nuclear weapons. He also has introduced numerous bills relating to cybersecurity, such as one that provides tax incentives for cybersecurity training. Out of the 9 bills the Youth Advisory Council recommended, all of them are under review for co-sponsorship. The first bill that we recommended for co-sponsorship was H.R. 6524, the Federal Cybersecurity Workforce Expansion Act. This bill establishes an apprenticeship program and a pilot program on cybersecurity that leads directly to employment in a cybersecurity work role with the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency or position within a company or other entity. Next slide. The next bill was H.R. 7424, the Renewable Roadsides Act. This bill directs the Secretary of Transportation and the Secretary of Energy to jointly conduct a study on the development of facilities for solar energy generation, solar energy storage, and solar energy transmission or distribution on available federal land adjacent to the national highway system. H.R. 5759, the Post-Quantum Cybersecurity Standards Act. This bill amends the National Quantum Initiative Act and the Cybersecurity Research and Development Act to advance the rapid deployment of post-quantum cybersecurity standards across the United States economy and support United States cryptography research. H.R. 7790, the Women and Underrepresented Minorities in STEM Booster Act of 2024, and it aims to address the underrepresentation of certain demographic groups in STEM fields, and it also highlights disparities in STEM education and employment based on gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability status. It authorizes grants for initiatives such as online workshops, mentoring programs, internships, outreach programs, and efforts to recruit and retain underrepresented faculty. This bill defines terms like minority, underrepresented in science and engineering, and person with a disability, and also allocates funds to support these efforts over 5 fiscal years. H.R. 7123, the Quiet Act, amends the Communications Act of 1934 to require disclosures with respect to robocalls using artificial intelligence and to provide for enhanced penalties for certain violations involving artificial intelligence voice or text message impersonation. H.R. 6943, the No AI Fake Replicas and Unauthorized Duplications Act of 2024, aims to establish property rights for individuals in their likeness and voice. It addresses the misuse of digital technology, particularly deepfake software, to create unauthorized replicas or imitations of individuals' voices and likenesses. The bill asserts that individuals possesses which are transferable and descendable lasting beyond the individual's death. The bill outlines provisions for unauthorized simulation of voice or likeness and a First Amendment defense provision and limitations on civil actions. Additionally, it clarifies that the act does not preempt other laws protecting individuals' name, voice, or likeness. H.R. 7197, the Artificial Intelligence Environmental Impacts Act of 2024, requires the administrator of the EPA to carry out a study on the environmental impacts of artificial intelligence and requires the director of the NIST to convene a consortium on such environmental impacts, and also requires the director to develop a voluntary reporting system for the reporting of the environmental impacts of artificial intelligence. HR 6124, the Cybersecurity Skills Integration Act, requires the administrator of the EPA to to carry out a study on the environmental impacts of artificial intelligence and requires the director of the NRC to convene a consortium on such environmental impacts and requires the director to develop a voluntary reporting system for the environmental impacts of AI. I think the description is the same for this one, but we also recommended the Cybersecurity Skills Integration Act for co-sponsorship. Next slide. HR 7585, the Enhanced Cybersecurity for SNAP Act of 2024, amends the Food and Nutrition Act of 2008 to require the promulgation of cybersecurity and digital service regulations relating to the use of EBT cards under the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. And now I'll pass it off to Raina and Graham to talk about their bill. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Rena Joe, and I'm working with Graham DeLucia on this bill. We introduced the Food Waste Prevention Act, inspired by our shared passion for environmentalism. This issue addresses the pervasive problem of food waste and food insecurity by acting as an incentive for restaurants and hotels to donate excess food to food banks. Talking about some numbers, there are currently around 35 million individuals in the US who face food insecurity, 10 million of which are children. Despite the prevalence of food insecurity, the US is the #1 producer of food waste in the world, generating roughly 80 million tons of food waste each year. There's a clear gap between the amount of food produced and the lack of food that so many families experience. In an environmental context, food waste comprises approximately 28% of landfill content and generates about 11% of the United States greenhouse gas emissions. And lastly, there are economic consequences as well, as the US is estimated to waste at least $408 billion on food each year.
We recognize this disparity between surplus and scarcity as an opportunity to tackle two intersecting problems: environmental waste and hunger. If passed, the Food Waste Prevention Act would establish a tax incentive program for restaurants to donate excess food or leftovers to nonprofits, granted that the food clears requirements as inappropriate for human consumption. This would mitigate the number of meals and goods that end up in landfills while addressing food insecurity and providing food banks with more nutritious food. California passed a similar bill at the state level in 2022 and has found really great success, so we hope to expand the program federally to maximize its potential impact. I'm now going to pass it on to Bobby Bennett to introduce another potential bill.
Hi, I'm Bobby Bennett, and I'm a junior at Redondo Union High School. And the bill that I drafted up is the Mental Health Crisis Response Team Act. So it would serve for the protection of our local police officers and citizens in the area. And just for some background on where I got the idea, in 2022, it was found that people with untreated mental illnesses are 16 times more likely to be killed during interaction with the police than an average American. And last year, approximately 10% of all calls received by 911 operators involved a person going through a mental health crisis. On top of that, a third of American adults report that they've experienced some type of mental health episode just in the past year alone. And it was shown that most people with mental health issues are not violent at all, but police often apply force disproportionately to people with mental health issues compared to similar calls involving stable people. So the Mental Health Crisis Response Team Act would primarily focus on the training and education of law enforcement officers on mental health issues and behavioral tendencies to provide them with the skills and training necessary to diffuse these situations. The benefit would also be to make police encounters safer for not only people with mental health issues, but also for the officers involved, as they're often injured and under high stress situations. So when officers don't know how to appropriately act in high stress situations with people suffering from mental health crisis, they might feel threatened and fear for their safety, causing them to use force that might not have been necessary. It was researched and determined that most police departments do not teach de-escalation techniques as a standard practice, and only 37% of police departments in the country's 100 largest cities recommend trying situational de-escalation before using force. It was also shown in written testimony that police officers feel unable and ill-equipped to handle situations with mentally unstable individuals due to poor communication and mistakenly perceived behaviors as threatening. So the bill would allocate funding towards the education of de-escalation practices in the police force, and it would also create a specialized unit to respond to mental health crisis calls. Rather than punishing police for unnecessary actions and responses towards people, the bill would seek to prevent these actions and responses before they occur. It would mandate the formation of the response team in local police departments dedicated to providing on-scene support and intervention for 911 calls involving people with suspected mental health issues. It's still a very young bill, but I really feel strongly about this idea. And I think that it is just a step in the right direction towards making our cities safer for everyone. Thank you, everyone. And I will pass it on.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm a junior at Marlborough, and I'm very excited to talk to you a little bit about my bill proposal, which is the Secure Futures Act. And so the United States is currently undergoing a crisis of homelessness, which has been inflicted by negligence to address the discrepancies that have for decades existed between socioeconomic classes. Housing insecurity as it pertains to youth in particular is a problem that has been largely overlooked legally, despite how it affects approximately 50,000 citizens under the age of 25. The deinstitutionalization of mental hospitals under Ronald Reagan has profoundly contributed to the number of mentally ill people living on the streets today, and the generational pattern that has been established is an issue that urges addressing. The narrow scope of unhoused youth receiving professional mental health services is a notable dilemma that has not been adequately handled within this country. Although a considerable level of stigma exists around the concept of formal services for youth experiencing housing insecurity, financial barriers, which work in tandem with limited availability of services, are an encapsulating factor of the lack of treatment among youth. A vast majority of those who do not have stable access to professional help have turned to substance abuse as a replacement for professional service. And while the utilization of various substances may temporarily act as a coping mechanism for the traumas inevitably associated with experiencing homelessness as a minor, it ultimately highlights the insufficient nature of United States' current legal stagnance as it pertains to housing insecurity within our youth demographic. And an obstacle that is also perpetually aligned with the inaccessibility of professional services is the choice many people facing housing insecurity make to not seek support. Already in a vulnerable socioeconomic position, many unhoused individuals understandably avoid going out of their way to obtain professional help out of uncertainty and a lack of education. Community treatment centers are generally few and far between and can have the unintended effect of augmenting the hesitation many unhoused individuals have internalized. In response to this, some organizations have taken it upon themselves to develop mobile outreach programs for adults living on the streets. In parallel, the Secure Futures Act will entail the allocation of federal funding for a mobile outreach program that thoroughly addresses the mental health crisis that unhoused youth are systemically bound to. Given the epidemic of homelessness in our country, the Secure Futures Act would ensure that youth experiencing housing insecurity would have access to substantial, reliable professional mental health services. The Secure Futures Act combats the frequently omitted obstacle of aversion to professional services by directing their energies to the root of the homelessness crisis, which encourages individuals to feel incentivized to accept support. This act would also address the alienation and shame that many unhoused youth have been frequented with, and would consider re-entry initiatives that are designed to provide resourced avenues for minors hoping to secure their futures. This act is imperative to set a precedent for generational prosperity and represent a community that has been overlooked for decades. Thank you, and I'll now pass it on to the Q&A portion.
Hi, my name is Callie Boren, and I'm a senior at Miracosta High School. My question for the Congressman is, do you foresee abortion rights in California changing in the future after the overturning of Roe v. Wade?
Thank you, Callie, for that question. Let me first say thank you to other presenters in the previous section. As you can tell, there's a lot of bills out there. There's a lot of interesting bills, and I do want to thank the Youth Advisory Council for their hard work in bringing these bills to my attention, as well as the various ideas for bills as well. Specifically to this question, we know that Donald Trump campaigned on overturning Roe versus Wade. He then bragged when Roe versus Wade was overturned. And now you see abortion rights under attack across America. It's already had an effect in California because when a number of these states restrict or ban abortions, it causes the women in those states, some of them to then come to California for reproductive health care. That then increases the burden and workload on the reproductive healthcare providers in California. So there's already that impact. Second, the Supreme Court is looking at cases involving restrictions on medication abortion that can be received through the mail. If they put restrictions on that, that will also affect every state, including blue states like California. And then we know that Republicans in the House are attempting to put in a national abortion ban. If Republicans win the House and the Senate and the White House, then it's certainly possible they would implement a national abortion ban.
Hello, Congressman Lieu. My name is Nathan Brown. I'm a senior at PV Peninsula High School. It's an honor to be speaking with you here today. And my question for you is, how do you feel social media is affecting the current political climate in America? And how do you think it can be used in politics as an effective tool instead of a harmful one?
Well, thank you for your questions. I'll take the second one first. I think it's accurate to describe technology, including social media, as a tool. Technology can be used for harmful ways as well as for good ways. And a tool by itself is neutral. So it's just going to be up to different people how they want to use it. And hopefully we can try to have social media be less harmful. Now, I think a lot of it is just going to have to require the private sector companies for them to do their part. I think it gets extremely tricky when you have government trying to tell people what they can and cannot say on social media. And so it's not clear to me that having government involved in social media would yield a better result than what we have now. So I'm certainly open to having discussions on that issue, but my general view is that the First Amendment gives people the right to say whatever it is they want to say, even if it is speech that we find offensive or we don't agree with. Regarding your first question, how do you feel social media is affecting the current political climate in America? If you're on social media, there's a lot of negativity. I think part of that is basically the anonymity issue. A lot of folks can post anonymously on social media. And I think that allows people to say things they probably otherwise wouldn't if people knew who they were when they said it. I'm not sure we can actually fix that. Social media also does connect people, and it does allow people to have discussions with each other. So I think there's both good and bad going on. And again, if you look at social media, it's a technological tool. People can use it for good ways or bad ways, and hopefully folks will set upon themselves to try to use it for good purposes.
Thank you, Congressman Lieu. I'm going to pass it on to fellow council member Embry.
Hello, Congressman Lieu. I'm Emery Cunningham, a senior at Santa Monica High School. And my question is, can you walk us through your thought process for voting on legislation?
Sure. Thanks for that question. So I'd say the overwhelming majority of votes, it's not very difficult for me because I know where I'll stand on those issues. So for example, I'm pro-choice. So if I see a bill that's pro-choice, I'm going to vote for it. If I see a bill that's anti-choice, I'm going to vote against it. So a lot of these bills are not very difficult. Then there's a class of bills where I may not know much about the subject matter. So if there's going to be a bill on, drip irrigation agriculture, I don't know very much about that. So I'm going to rely on, what did the Democrats on the Agricultural Committee, how did they vote on that bill? I'll look at the staff recommendation. I'll look at recommendations from folks that are affected by that bill, farmers and um, water rights holders and other folks, and I'll consider that. So there's a second class of bills, which is basically, things I never thought about, or things I never heard of, or things I don't really understand. And in those cases, I will read the various memos and look at how Democrats on a relevant committee voted. And then the last category is probably the hardest, which is I know exactly what the issue is. It's simply a judgment call as to how I'm going to vote. And so every issue is context and case dependent, and it's fact dependent. And it's really hard in abstract to know or describe how my thought process is. But what I try to do is I try to acquire as much information as I can, see what my constituents think, see what the policies are in terms of whether it's good or bad policy, and then look at whether it's going to be good or bad for our country and our district, and then I'll make a judgment call.
Thank you very much for your answer. I will pass it now to Noah.
Hello, Congressman Lieu. My name is Noah Davis. I'm a senior at Miracosta High School. My question for you is, the House of Representatives recently passed a bill that would ban TikTok from being used in the United States if TikTok's parent company ByteDance does not divest its ownership in the app. However, there have been many data leaks amongst domestic social media and internet companies already. Do you support an internet bill of rights that would protect user data? And if so, what specifically would you want to see in such a bill?
Thank you for your questions. I'm actually not sure they're related to each other because data leaks primarily don't come from social media companies. They primarily come from everywhere, right? So you had a data leak out of Home Depot. You have data leaks from, credit reporting bureaus. You have data leaks everywhere. So it's not particular. I wouldn't say social media companies are sort of blamed for data leaks. The reason I voted to require TikTok to divest its foreign ownership is because this is something that the United States has routinely done. We've routinely asked a number of companies to divest their foreign ownership if we thought it would affect our national security. There's actually an entire process for doing that called the CFIUS process. We have, in fact, had other social media companies, or at least one other social media company in the past, divest foreign ownership because the United States made them do it. So there's nothing unusual about this other than the fact that it is a popular app, right? So that's, why people are focused on it, because a lot of people know what TikTok is. But the actual issue itself is not unusual. We routinely do this for all sorts of companies. It's also something that other countries do as well. My view is, if you look at TikTok, it's a Chinese company. It is headquartered in Beijing. So is, the Chinese Communist Party directing TikTok? I don't know the answer to that. But it is pretty clear to me that TikTok knows exactly what the policies of the Chinese Communist Party are. And I think it's highly unlikely TikTok would do anything to try to go against those policies. And at any time, the Chinese Communist Party could direct TikTok to do X, Y, or Z. Also, we did see a number of videos on TikTok. They were trying to influence the election in Taiwan. We've seen an explosion of anti-Semitism on TikTok. We have seen a lot of vile videos on TikTok. And is this, Chinese Communist Party directing that? I don't know, but certainly doesn't seem to me that TikTok is doing a lot to try to moderate that content. So those are some of the reasons that I voted to require TikTok to divest its foreign ownership. And then regarding an internet bill of rights, I'm not, necessarily opposed to that. The issue is essentially the cost, right, of having such a bill, because what it would likely do is if you said, hey, Home Depot, if you have a data leakage breach, we're going to, allow all these consumers to sue you. That could, Home Depot get a pretty heavy hit, right, from that. And so you have to weigh the costs and benefits of, you put all these companies under threat of potentially, going out of business because there was a data breach, or of having to, try to spend a lot of money to rectify a data breach. Hackers can be pretty sophisticated. Sometimes companies can try their best and hackers can still serve. But I'm open to that issue. I'm not opposed to a Bill of Rights. And I think if there was a way to do it where you could balance the cost and benefits, I don't have any principal objection to holding companies more accountable if they leak user data. But depending on how the bill was done, it could be quite devastating to certain companies.
Thank you for your answer. I'll pass this off to Kyle.
Hello, my name is Kyle Gablesberg. I'm a senior at South High School, and my question for you, Congressman, is how truly difficult is it to reach partisanship while working in today's Congress? And do you envision it getting easier or harder in the future? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Well, let's just look at the last 4 years. Democrats controlled the House of Representatives last term. We had a very thin margin, just a few votes. We had one of the most successful U.S. Congresses in history, passing the American Rescue Plan, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Bipartisan Chips and Science Act, the Bipartisan PACT Act, and the Inflation Reduction Act, the greatest climate change bill in U.S. history. That was just done with a margin of a few votes. This term, Republicans control the House. They have a margin of a few votes. It's been chaos, right? We almost had a catastrophic default on our nation's debts. We had a number of attempted shutdowns by the Republican governing majority. We delayed critical funding in terms of humanitarian assistance and funding to our allies. So it's not really, I think, the margin of the votes. I think it's really, leadership. I think it's each party having different views of governing. Democrats want to govern and move the American family forward. A number of Freedom Caucus Republicans want to burn the House down, and they want to simply tear everything apart and do government shutdown and cause chaos. They took out their own speaker. So yeah, this term has been really hard. And hopefully the American people see that, and the American people in November will make a decision. Do they want to continue to have this chaos? In which case they'll keep the Republican majority. And if they don't, then they can give Democrats the opportunity to govern again next term.
Thank you for your answer, Congressman. I'm going to pass it on to Andrew Goldman.
Hi, I'm Andrew Goldman, and I'm a senior at Brentwood School. So my question is, in Congress, you often have to negotiate with people who hold completely different beliefs than you. And I was just wondering, what issue, belief, or value is more commonly held between people of different parties than most Americans think?
So thank you for that question. I don't think it's so much that members of Congress hold completely different beliefs. I think many members of Congress have similar beliefs, just different ways of getting there. So I think most people would want a strong economy. I think most people would want lower prices. I think most folks would want to have, strong national security. I think most people would want law and order, and we would want peace. I mean, a lot of these beliefs are pretty much the same, right? I mean, we don't want chaos. It's sort of one difference is, how you get to those goals. But something has changed. And it sort of started when Donald Trump got elected. In the past, right, we'd have sort of different visions of how we get to, I think, similar goals and similar beliefs. And, you could work with the other side on that, since we had, sort of at least similar goals and similar beliefs. But something started to change, which is now I would, let's say, look at an orange and a Freedom Caucus member go, no, that's an apple. So when people have very different facts, then that makes it hard. If you're in a different factual universe, that is a problem. And part of that also is the way media is. If you're liberal, you might tend to watch MSNBC. If you're conservative, you might watch Fox. And if you look at the shows on both those two channels, there's not a lot of overlap in terms of facts. They're sort of different factual universes, and that is not helpful. I don't really know how to fix that. If anyone has any ideas, please let me know. So I think we're just in a different world than we were 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, where folks would see 3 major news channels, and you'd watch Tom Brokaw or Peter Jennings, and you wouldn't sort of have your own version of reality. But that's what we have now for some folks, and it is difficult to deal with that. And if folks have different ideas on how to make it better, please let me know.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it to Casper.
Hello, Congressman Lieu. Thank you for your time. My name is Casper Holden, and I'm a current senior at Santa Monica High School. My question is, how has your tenure as congressman and the state legislature affected how you view our political system?
Thank you for that question. I was elected to the legislature in 2005 in California, served for about 9 years, and then I was elected to Congress. I've served a little more than 9 years now in Congress. So in about 18 years of legislative experience, it's pretty clear to me that the entire process is designed to not be efficient. It's designed to let lots of voices be heard. So government is not designed like a business, nor should it be. Governments are designed to let lots of people try to put in their voices and their views and their inputs, and to try to persuade you. And then what you try to do is you try to build coalitions. You try to put together votes to get a majority in both chambers, the legislature, and get the executive branch to sign the bill. So that's just the way our government is structured. It's not designed to be fast or efficient. It's designed to be democratic, to basically allow as many people as possible to allow their views to be heard, and for the members of Congress to be able to, or state legislators to be able to hear different folks' viewpoints and then try to make the best decision based on their best data at the time.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jaden Kim, and I'm a sophomore from South High School. My question to you is, what advice do you have for young Asian Americans that want to get involved in U.S. politics, where there are typically not as many Asian Americans?
So thank you, Jaden, for that question. I guess I would answer it the same way, whether it was an Asian American student asking me that question, or a non-Asian American student asking me that question, which is basically, I would first ask back, why do you want to be in politics? If you have a good answer to that, then I think you should go and try to be in politics and try to do stuff. And, unless you've got, $1 million, or your, last name is, Kennedy, it's not that easy to just sort of up and run for Congress, for example. So I'd advise that folks do activities in the community, get to know their community, get to know the people, figure out where you want to live, and sort of understand what your community is all about. And then when opportunities arise, you could try to seek those opportunities. I would advise be involved in civic organizations and community groups. You can work on, various campaigns, whether it's for an elected official or for an issue or for an organization. So that's what I would advise people to do.
Thank you, Congressman Liu. I'll now be passing it to Vincent.
Hello, Congressman Liu. My name is Vincent Lau, and I'm a senior at Beverly Hills High School. So my prepared question is, how do you decide which bills to co-sponsor or propose? Do you have a driving philosophy behind these decisions? And I realize this question is somewhat similar to the previous one. And so if possible, can you answer, do you have any personal goals in mind or personal policies that you wish to achieve in this coming year?
So thank you for those questions. When I was in the California State Legislature, after a while, I realized that anybody can do my job if what you want to do is help Bank of America. By the way, there's nothing wrong with Bank of America. I think they're perfectly fine bank. But what they'll do is, they'll write the bill, they'll lobby all your colleagues on your side of the aisle, they'll lobby all your colleagues on the opposite side of the aisle, they'll get it passed off the first legislative chamber, then they'll lobby all the folks in the other legislative chamber, and then they'll lobby the executive branch, and then you get your bill signed. You don't have to do all that much. But how many people, would, let's say, form an organization to create a lobbying firm to help homeless people? How many homeless people know even how to get to their member of Congress's office or a state legislature's office to ask for help? How many super PACs exist to help homeless issues? It's like very little, and maybe virtually none. I'm not exactly sure. So I sort of take the view that maybe I should start introducing bills that may not be introduced if it wasn't me sitting in that position. And so that's sort of one factor I consider in sort of the kinds of bills that I introduce or don't introduce. Is there, a way I can, help folks who are less powerful get their voices heard? So, for example, animals don't have a voice, right? Just by definition. So I have introduced a number of animal welfare bills. I've introduced a number of bills to try to help the homelessness issue. And so that's a factor I'll consider is, would something happen but for the fact that I was in that position? And then another factor I consider is there some particular expertise I have that maybe I could offer? So it just happens that I'm a recovering computer science major. Artificial intelligence has sort of all of a sudden become quite interesting and been adopted in a variety of places. There's been a qualitative leap in artificial intelligence in these large language models that started to become relatively successful about a year and a half ago. And so I have introduced legislation around issues such as artificial intelligence. So that's another factor I'll consider. Is there something that I have in my background or some expertise that I can offer that maybe someone else might not be able to offer? And then regarding, personal sort of goals for legislation or what I hope to accomplish. When I was in the California State Legislature, I passed the first state law in a nation to ban gay conversion therapy. I do have a federal version that would ban it nationwide. About 20 states or so have adopted the California law. And I think it'd be great if we could ban it because the practice, not only is it unscientific, has no basis in fact, but it's also, in my view, evil. There is nothing wrong with someone who is LGBTQ, and to try to make them who they are not, to me, is evil. So my hope is we can get that into law. Also, I do think climate change is a major problem. And I think the Inflation Reduction Act was fantastic in terms of funding for clean energy programs and for helping to affect climate change through funding. I also think we need policy changes. And so hopefully we can get some significant climate change legislation through on the policy side as well. And then I would love to be able to pass voting rights legislation, because we have a number of states that are trying to restrict voting rights. And to me, that's just completely undemocratic.
Thank you so much, everyone. And thank you so much, Congressman Lieu, for answering all those questions. So I'm going to go over a quick overview of the application process for any students that are joining or will be watching later to apply for the Youth Advisory Council this coming year. So the application period is now open. It has been on our website, which is at lieu.house.gov under Helping You, and you'll find the Youth Advisory Council information there. The application deadline is Friday at July, I believe it's July 5th. On there, that's an error. It's like the 5th instead of the 7th, but it's all on the website. The required application materials that you need is a high school transcript. If you're a middle school student coming in as a freshman, your middle school transcript is just fine. And then you have 2 letters of recommendation from non-family members that are needed. And they can submit them directly to me via that email at yak.lieu@mail.house.gov. And you can also submit a 1-page essay explaining why you wish to be a Youth Advisory Council member, as well as a resume, a signed consent form, which you can find on our website, as well as an application form. Folks that are returning can also submit all of those materials, but you can only serve a maximum of 2 years on the council, but the seniors that are graduating this year are not eligible, unfortunately. But we really have appreciated everybody's contribution this past year, and I've said that in the last meeting that this is one of the favorite parts of my job, I guess, to work with all of you and to hear what you have to say. And I know the Congressman values it a lot too. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Congressman Lieu to wrap us up.
Thank you, Aurelia. And once again, I want to thank the fantastic work of the Youth Advisory Council. I also want to thank my staff for putting on this youth town hall. Thank you, Aurelia, for your great work, and as well as my district director, Nico. And also we had help from 2 of our interns. Want to give a shout out to Veronica Reyes, as well as Sophia Perez Valles, and want to thank everybody again for participating. And thank you again for being part of our amazing country and our democracy. And have a great day.